Welcome to OhSister, where I unpack my Mormon sister missionary journals 10 years later. Just a quick heads up that today I'm talking about another kind of heavy topic. Feel free to skip this episode if you don't want to hear about stalking and fear of violence and the themes of how that occurs occasionally on the mission. Okay. So yeah, with that, with that disclaimer, the theme of the episode today or the week. We're going to talk about harassment, assault, missionary safety, that kind of thing. So I was trying to figure out how to even address this topic because there are a lot of thoughts that I have about it. Probably a lot of thoughts you have about it, and it does come up in my journal in the week. So obviously that sucks, and it's kind of sucks to talk about as well. But I don't want to just tell scary stories and just leave it at that. I kind of want to get into, the systems behind the way things happen and how they're dealt with, right? So I was reading around, looking at different things, and I decided to go with some of the official church training things for missionaries, as well as I wanted to start with a blog post from Exponent 2. And this is actually my first time discussing Exponent 2 here on the podcast. I'll probably talk about it, I'll continue to use this as a resource because I just sort of remembered that this exists, and I'm like, dang, I should use this more than I've been using Reddit, right? If you don't know about Exponent 2, quick summary, it is a feminist blog / magazine. They have printed copies and also digital versions that you can get. And it started in Boston, I think, in maybe the 70s. I can't exactly remember. And I think they had to stop for some reason. So the first time they did it was Exponent, and then it restarted. So now it's Exponent 2. That's why it's called Exponent 2. And it is run by, I believe, faithful Mormon women, at least originally. Now it's a little bit more diverse. So there's contributions from fully believing members as well as ex-Mormons. And so there's lots of really cool stuff in there. And the focus is on gender and all that good stuff. So really interesting resource for you to just be aware of. And today I'm going to read a snippet from one of their semi-anonymous writers on their blog. So this is, I'm reading a section from the article titled Therapy, 8 Reasons Why It is Essential Mission Prep. And the author's name is Bailey. There's no last name given, presumably, for some anonymity. I'm assuming she, her pronouns. So I'm presuming this is an active Mormon woman, and she contributes to the blog, right? So this thought piece that she shared is from last July, from July of 2024. And she kind of shared that she has, she's not a therapist, but she's had a great experience with therapy. She has, kids. She's, seen people go out on missions. So she is talking about how therapy is probably a really good idea for people before they go on missions, and she has all these good reasons why. And a lot of the things she points out are topics that I've talked about extensively on the podcast, like scrupulosity and toxic perfectionism, as well as preparing for the intensity of living away from home for the first time. And I'm going to focus on the 6th point she makes, and I'm just going to read that whole section. It's 2 paragraphs. So here we go. Number 6, recognize abuse and assault. Okay, so In the church, there is generally a culture of be nice, just get along, don't cause contention. Unfortunately, this can lead to young adults serving as missionaries not recognizing abuse when it happens to them or others. If abuse happens and is recognized, many young adults have not been taught how to respond to keep themselves safe. Too many mission presidents do not know how to recognize or respond to abuse either. As one survivor shared, while her assault was horrible, the lack of care from her mission president and the church felt like a second assault. The church does not make figures available for how many missionaries are victims of abuse or assault each year. I do know that missionaries often live in neighborhoods in the U.S. that are not safe and are sent to countries where the U.S. State Department advises increased caution or travel reconsideration. Additionally, the church culture of deference to authority places missionaries at risk for abuse of all types by leaders. Okay, so that's the end of the quote there. Thank you, Bailey. Please check out the rest of the article if you're interested. Link in the description, of course. I liked this. I liked her summary of how one of the problems of missionary culture / church culture / I know it's bigger than just the system of the church culture. It's kind of like a macrocosm of like the whole U.S., but I think it's particularly bad if you're like a Mormon kid. You're also just super young, right? And I really like how she points out that there is so much of an emphasis on being nice, being obedient, getting along, and not causing contention that it's like, yeah, sometimes missionaries don't even realize when there is something going on. Like, because they're like, oh, I can't, they just have to go along with it. And also, even if they can tell that something is bad, they don't know what to do to like report it and try to get help, right? And I also really like that she points out that there's a culture of deference to authority, and the way she takes that as like that places missionaries at risk for abuse by their church leaders. But I think also this deference to authority is a big part of why missionaries can be putting themselves in dangerous situations in the first place. Not to say that it is a missionary's fault if they're in a dangerous situation and something happens to them, but when I was on my mission, we definitely had this idea that God would protect us and we could go do stuff we normally wouldn't do because we were on God's errand. There were angels around us watching us. And we could we sort of felt invincible. And there were lots of stories that missionaries would share when we were, when we're having our lunch break during our zone training meeting gatherings, or like hanging out before we all leave after district meetings. There's lots of missionary sort of folklore that's shared, and often the stories are likely hyperbolic or even made up stories of really obedient, faithful missionaries who are miraculously saved from like dangerous, horrible situations. And we get to the point as missionaries that it's like, this is real. These stories of people being transported by angels in the blink of an eye to another place in the world, like I believed it, right? And I believed that if I was just super obedient and faithful and I listened to my leaders, like they would keep me safe and God would keep me safe. So with this, with this topic in mind, you might be thinking of the movie Heretic that came out in last fall. I think it was late 2024. If you don't know about it, that's okay. I haven't watched it. I probably won't watch it because I just don't like horror very much. Plus, I'm like, I don't want to watch scary stuff about sister missionaries because it's like too close to home, right? But some big horror film came out about two sister missionaries who were like in this scary situation with like this evil man, right? And it made a big hullabaloo and a big ruckus, and the church had a big PR effort to try to help people be like, don't worry, this is not normal, like we totally keep missionaries safe, right? So I found I found a release from the church newsroom about how they keep missionaries safe, and this is from last November 2024. So let me read to you what the church said about how they keep missionaries safe in response to the film about missionaries being in a horror-like situation. Okay, here's the quote. To assist journalists and the public with questions and concerns regarding the safety and well-being of missionaries, the following is a summary of the standards and the types of training missionaries receive to help protect them physically, spiritually, and emotionally in their day-to-day service. So then they have a list of general missionary guidelines, like that keep missionaries safe, and they have like live the commandments, example, moral purity, honesty, and healthy living. They have take care of physical health and exercise regularly, and they have promptly report safety threats, including assaults and harassment. So put a pin in that last one, because we're going to learn exactly how missionaries are told to report safety threats, right? So remember that. And then the press release concludes with the following quote: the booklet, Missionary Standards for Disciples of Jesus Christ, is supplemented by 12 engaging and informative safety zone videos. These were released in 2019 to inform missionaries about potential hazards. The videos are viewed in missionary training centers and periodically throughout a missionary service. Okay, so that's the press release. There's more to it, right? But I didn't want to read you the whole thing. That'd be boring. So yeah, I'll just point out the main themes that they had are like, look, we tell our missionaries to do lots of things to keep them safe, and we also have this extensive rule book and safety training that they are participating in regularly. Now, this was not the case in my time as a missionary, 10 years ago. The Missionary Standards for Disciples of Jesus Christ, this handbook or whatever, is from 2019. So it was not there for the majority of church missionaries service, right? There was not very much specific guidance on missionary safety besides just the small things in the white handbook, which is not very much. So I'm glad that they made more. And I was really curious about how our current missionaries being prepared for dealing with safety concerns during their missions. So I decided to read through it, and actually the bulk of the missionary standard stuff it's kind of like they replaced the white handbook with this, but then they added a few more healthy things than in the original white handbook. I'm not sure if it is actually a replacement for the white handbook, because I'm not a missionary anymore, right? But it was kind of the vibe of what the standards were that they talked about. So I'm going to read now the introduction to the Missionary Standards for Disciples of Jesus Christ. It's a training handbook that they have for missionaries now. Okay, so this says, quote, "These missionary standards are approved by the First Presidency and Quorum of the 12 Apostles. They will help protect you physically, spiritually, and emotionally, and help you be the disciple Jesus Christ needs you to become." Then there's like a summary of what they tell you to do. They say just like enjoy and love your time as a missionary and be obedient. And a direct quote, "True disciples of Jesus Christ are obedient." Okay, so still very focused on be obedient and love this time as a missionary, and doing this will help protect you physically. And to go further with that point, in this section, it says, quote, "You will be most safe when you follow the commandments and missionary standards and use common sense. But realize that even when you keep the commandments, you may experience trouble, sickness, or harm. The Savior experienced all of these things, and he promises, 'I will not leave you comfortless. I will come to you.'" Okay, so reading that, I did feel a little bit frustrated from my perspective now that they're still saying they're putting so much pressure on missionaries to make themselves safe physically, spiritually, and emotionally by being super obedient and following all of the missionary standards, some of which have nothing to do actually with making you physically, spiritually, and emotionally safe. Some of them, are still probably detrimental to your health in some way. But I do appreciate that they're now saying in something that missionaries are potentially reading somewhat regularly, they do say, even if you keep the commandments, you might experience trouble, sickness, or harm. So that is a really positive change in my opinion. And I hope that is something that is stressed a lot more to missionaries than it was to me when I was a missionary, because that's not really, that wasn't really a message that we heard. We didn't even really talk about like harm or non-safety in like a sort of realistic training kind of way. It just wasn't even talked about. So I'm really glad that they do address it in that way. So there are a lot of different things they talk about. I might talk about them later, but I'm going to jump to the section that they have about dealing with dangerous situations and threats. So this is there are 6 total sections plus a mysterious 7th section that's an appendix that didn't actually show up in the main page. Like there was a link to the 7th section, but when I was just like scrolling through the booklet, I couldn't get it to open to it. So I thought that was weird. But anyway, in the 4th section, 4.5, dangerous situations and threats. Here's what they say about, here's like the main handbook's guidance about dangerous situations and threats. Okay, so 2 paragraphs, just a direct quote right here. "Many possible dangers can be avoided with common sense and by observing mission standards, including staying where you can see and hear your companion. However, people may still harm you even when you try to be safe. If there is a problem, immediately report it to either of your mission leaders. Leave immediately if you or your companion feels uncomfortable about a location, person, or situation, including a teaching situation. Listen to spiritual promptings. You may leave your companion if you feel he or she may be a danger to you. If you leave your companion, call either of your mission leaders immediately." Okay, so there's the instruction. It's a lot more clear about what to do if you're in danger, so I think that's really good. I really appreciate that they say that, although they say like, yes, you can avoid possible dangers if you use common sense and follow the rules, but that you still might come to harm even if you're following all the rules. And then they do talk about, okay, remember I said put a pin in the church newsroom they gave a list of things that missionaries are supposed to do to be safe. And one of the things they said, remember, was to promptly report experiences of like harassment or assault. But I think that feels a little bit misleading to me. Maybe not intentionally, but to me it seems misleading, because if I'm like a journalist and I'm not really familiar with the whole, I haven't gone through and read the church training that how missionaries are supposed to report problems, I would read the guidance to immediately promptly report harm at safety concerns, that they should call the police and like, okay, yeah, if missionary, or like whatever the local authorities are, right? But actually, the expectation, the explicit training of what you're supposed to do if you're in a dangerous situation, it says if there is a problem, immediately report it to either of your mission leaders. So I think your mission president or the mission president's wife. So that's still a concern to me, because as we will see, when in my journal, we were trained to just reach out to our mission leaders and not to the police, right? Like, I don't remember if they explicitly told us to not call the police, but it was like just not even mentioned. It was like just immediately call like your mission president and like your district leader, right? So that's still what they say. And I don't like that. Then they also linked to, there was a link of like, here are extra things for what to do in a dangerous situation. And I was like, oh, interesting, because this little 2-paragraph section is not very much for how to deal with dangerous situations. So I'm going to click on that. And then that's when we went to the mysterious 7th appendix section. So that was kind of weird that it was like more of the stuff about how to protect yourself and your companion, like hopefully preemptively, but also afterwards, what should you do if something bad happens. I thought it was weird that that was an appendix thing rather than like in the bulk of the training. So think of that what you will, but here's the other section about dangerous situations. So this is 7.8.1, preparing for dangerous situations. Okay, and there is actually quite a bit more about this stuff in the appendix. So here's the first one. I'm not going to read all of it, but stuff that felt most relevant. Here we go. Quote, the following guidelines can help you prepare for and respond to dangerous situations. So here's their list of what to do. Here we go. Pray for the Lord's protection daily. Listen to and follow the promptings of the Spirit, which can warn you of danger. Be familiar with your mission's emergency action plan. Follow the steps for how to act during emergency situations. Enter the information of the emergency contacts for your area and country in your phone. Keep your phone charged and with you at all times. Avoid areas your mission has designated as dangerous. Do not give the impression that you have items of value, for example, by carrying a bulky bag. Be observant of anything that is out of the ordinary, such as someone watching you closely, asking personal questions, or following you. Try to use body language to communicate you are confident and not afraid. Have a code word or phrase to use with your companion to signal you want to leave. Use it if you find yourself in a situation in which you feel unsafe. And then they've got like a here's what to do. Practice applying these guidelines consistently, even if others, including other missionaries, encourage you to put your safety at risk in order to accomplish your missionary work. Okay, so yeah, more specific guidelines for what to do. I think that's good. Some of these feel like good ideas. Some of them were things that were not available to me on my mission or were impossible, such as don't carry a bulky bag. If we were out all day and we had to carry our scriptures and the lesson pamphlets and all the stuff we had to carry, it would make our bag bulky. So I don't know how you're supposed to get around that. Maybe it's a little bit easier now because everything's on your iPad. But that one felt a little oh man, I'm sorry, I've got to carry my scriptures and my camera and my planner and my pencils and the little cards that I'm supposed to be handing out to everyone and the pamphlets I'm supposed to be handing out to everyone and maybe a granola bar. I mean, I don't think I ever carried snacks with me because there was no room in my bag. But we're getting tangential here. Let's go back to the point. I don't like the emphasis of praying for the Lord's protection, because, from my point now, it's maybe a little bit unfair because I just, don't believe in God anymore. So to me, that practice, looking back on my mission, gave me a false sense of security. But I can recognize that may be a little bit more complicated for you if you are, believe in some sort of divinity who will give you extra protection if you specifically ask for it. I guess in my mind, if there is any sort of God or divine person, if they're going to protect me, they're just going to whether or not I ask, right? But yeah, okay, so once again, this trusting in authority, trusting in God, trusting in angels to be with you, is not good, but there is a lot more focus on listen to your gut, listen to the promptings of the Spirit. If you feel be observant of anything that's out of the ordinary. I like that they give examples of what could be out of the ordinary. Someone watching you, someone asking personal questions or following you. So yeah, we didn't have any of this specific training on my mission. And as the blog post that I read earlier stated, the church does not share the statistics on missionaries who are harassed or assaulted or whatever. And I would guess that they don't even know, really, because I'm sure it's not reported, or at least it wasn't for a long time. And even if mission presidents keep track of what is reported, there's a lot that is not reported to mission presidents, at least in the past, and I'm sure probably still. It does seem like they're trying to get better at it, but they're not sharing that number, which is not good, I think. I think that an element of the informed consent of personally going on a mission yourself or sending your children on a mission would be knowing the number of missionaries who go out and are harmed, right? I think if I put myself into a hypothetical future position where I'm a believing Mormon mom and I'm sending my kid out, and if I know, I'm sending my kid out on a mission, but then the church has oh, by the way, this is the number of missionaries in this area who experience assault or harassment. And if it's a high number, I'd be oh, maybe I don't actually want my child to go. Or, okay, if they're going to go, I'm going to talk with them about ways, what they should do to be safe and what they should do if this happens, right? I think more of that would be good. But I think it's just not even on a lot of people's minds because we just hear stories of angels protecting missionaries, right? So now I'm going to jump to the last like section of this section, how to report assaults. So right, they mentioned in the section 4 that if there's a problem, you should immediately report it to your mission leaders. But fortunately, they have a little bit more description of what that should look like. So here's what it says. It's 7.8.4, reporting assaults, threats, or harassment. Okay, so again, here's another quote. If you have been assaulted, threatened, or harassed, and then they give examples of harassment, but I won't read that whole thing. If you have been assaulted, threatened, or harassed by anyone, immediately contact one of your mission leaders, someone at the mission office, or another trusted leader. Your mission leaders have the resources to support you with medical attention, professional counseling, relocation, or other needed assistance. Realize that you may be in shock after the event, and that you may also experience signs of trauma. Once you feel safe, try to record anything you can remember about the incident. Understand that if you are assaulted, no matter what you are doing, the assault is not your fault. You always have the choice to counsel with someone you trust and feel comfortable with, such as your mission president, his wife, civil authorities, or people at home. It is your decision whether to involve the police. That's what they say. So, again, I have a complicated reaction to this. I'm glad that there is more clarity on what to do. I'm glad that it's not just a nebulous, unspoken thing where, since there's no talking, you don't really talk about it, there's not really a specific guideline on what to do, then if something happens, it's like, oh, well, this doesn't even happen, so what am I supposed to do? I'm probably not, this isn't supposed to happen, so I'm not even going to say anything because something's wrong with me. I'm a bad missionary, right? I'm glad that they have more specific guidance. I'm glad that in the further explanation of how to report, that they do specify that if you report this to your mission leaders, they will help you get further assistance like medical attention, professional counseling, relocation, or other things. I appreciate that they say that you might be in shock, you might experience trauma, and I really, really am glad that they say, at least once here clearly, they say, no matter what you were doing, if you are assaulted, the assault is not your fault. I'm glad they say this. There is a lot, the way that they talk about ways to keep yourself safe previous to this do read a little bit of victim blaming to me, because there's so much of an emphasis of be obedient, follow the rules, be around your mission companion, listen to the spirit. All of these things will keep you safe, right? Because if that's the only thing you're hearing, or if that's the majority of what you're hearing, then if something happens, then the mind goes to, oh no, I must have done something wrong because God didn't protect me like I was promised. So it's actually my fault that something happened, because God would have protected me if I was doing everything right? So I'm glad they say this at least once, but I don't know that it's enough to counteract all the other messaging. And certainly this is not something that was heard on my mission, right? I also am glad that they say you have the choice to counsel with someone you trust and feel comfortable with. But also they say it's your decision whether to involve the police. I think that's probably a complicated legal thing, and maybe there are rules to say, maybe there are legal reasons for them to not just say, if anything happens, we have to go to the police. But also, I mean, I'm not, I don't know the law. I'm not a trained lawyer or anything, but this feels like maybe not illegal to me, but it feels exploitative to me, because I can imagine if somebody was like 18 or 19 and they were, I don't know, like on some volunteer trip with some big organization where they're like, I don't know, working in the Peace Corps. I don't know anything about the Peace Corps, so this could be totally wrong. But in my imagining, if there's someone who's volunteering with an organization and they're like part of this program, if something happens to them, I would assume the organization has like liability for the person in the program, you know, the volunteer or employee or whatever. And so I would imagine that it's the organization's responsibility and legal requirement to contact the police and authorities. So saying that it's up to the missionary makes, like, I know that it can be scary for survivors or victims, whatever word you want to call it, to want to get authorities involved, especially if it's a complicated situation with people that they know or their leadership or something, right? If you leave it up to the person who's just undergone a traumatic event to go to the police, it's probably more likely that they're not going to go to the police, and it looks better for the church, I think, if there are less things reported to the police. So while I think it's more likely that, you know, any sort of perpetrator who's regularly going around and bothering missionaries or something, it's good if the police are notified, and that will help protect, hopefully, future missionaries. But it would look bad for the church if there are lots of, like, legal police things, I can't think of the right word, like police reports about missionaries being in danger all the time, you know, like the less record there is in public record, legal record, police record of missionaries not being safe, it makes the church look better. So I don't like that they leave it up to the missionaries whether to involve the police. So yeah, we're going to end there on this introductory section because we have a lot to talk about this week, and this is already pretty detailed. So I hope you have a better understanding of at least the current missionary training and guardrails for some sort of safety and help for people who have bad experiences. Also, I hope you have a better idea of the lack of training and help around this area that has existed for most of the time of the history of missions. And with that, let's jump forward. I've been having a great time working on this project, but it turns out it takes a lot of time every week to keep this up. If you have the desire and the means to support me financially, it really helps a lot. Of course, I have a disclaimer that your donations will not bring eternal salvation for you or anyone else. There are links in the description where you can make a one-time donation or sign up to be a monthly patron to support this and my other creative work. Thank you. Okay, let's get back to it. Tuesday, April 14th, 2015. Mission Day 186. Sorry I didn't write yesterday. We didn't even get our nightly planning done since we were doing pillow talk. Kinda uncool, but we'll do better. Also, I'm writing while brushing my teeth with my left hand, which is proving to be tricky, so be super impressed. The weather was beautiful today, hovering around 77 degrees Fahrenheit. We had a picnic lunch with Sydney on our lawn just to enjoy it more. Okie dokie, that's all I wrote. And we're skipping a whole day today, or a whole day this week, today, whatever. Skipping Monday, don't know what happened on that Monday. Sounds like we're still having a pretty chill time. And I wrote, I was like, we didn't even do our nightly planning last night, so I didn't have time to write in my journal because we were just talking, which is actually, I think, maybe a sort of healthy thing to do. Like, if you're with these two people that you have to be with constantly, it's maybe nice to sort of stay up late talking sometimes. But of course, I felt bad about it, like kind of uncool, but we'll do better. So, I was so focused on being obedient, like they were telling me to be focused on, so I had complicated feelings, mostly probably that it was nice to stay up and talk and get to know each other, but also I felt guilty. And I felt like I needed to do better and repent, right? Also, it was kind of fun to read this out of my journal because, it's handwritten and my handwriting was a little bit messier where I was writing with my left hand. It was kind of funny. Anyway, let's keep going. Wednesday, April 15th, 2015. Mission Day 187. On our way back to Custer, we went through Oneida and Hot Springs. Between visiting the Clements, an awesome old couple who fed us pizza and live in a beautifully restored Victorian home, and Sister Kimball, a 92-year-old homebound Relief Society secretary who collects owls and reminds me of Grandma Gladys, we also stopped at Custer County Candy Company, a world-famous chocolate shop right in the Black Hills of South Dakota. They had beautifully displayed truffles of all flavors. A box of 4 was $12, so I got it and have already eaten 2. We finally began our first weekly planning session of the transfer, and I feel so much more established now. I always forget how much I really rely on planning and setting goals to feel settled and get things going. The other sisters are already in bed. We've had a quiet night. Wow. Okay. So, visiting members, going to a candy shop, a really pretty candy shop. I still remember this place. I had to take my family there. I did change the name of the shop. Fortunately, there are several chocolatier shops in South Dakota, so it wasn't too hard to pick one. And I remember it feeling really splurgy to spend $12 on these fancy handmade chocolate truffles, but I was so happy. I've always just gotten so much ecstatic joy from eating delicious food, especially if it's desserts, and especially if it's made beautiful. So this was really highlight. And I was trying to save them, but I had already eaten 2 of them, so very expensive. $6 for 2 chocolates and 2 more. Yeah. Now I look back on that and I'm like, yeah, they did not give us enough money. And also probably I used my personal money to pay for that. But anyway, I want to talk about finally getting our first weekly planning session done. So if you remember, once a week on our mission, it was every Thursday. Maybe it's different depending on your mission. We are supposed to take several hours during the day and go through all the steps of planning for the whole week. And this is week 2 of this transfer, or I don't know, week 2 or 3 of this being in this new area, and we still hadn't planned yet, and I was getting super stressed and feeling like a really bad disobedient missionary. So I do think that a lot of the relief that I was feeling was just like, oh my goodness, finally, we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. We're doing missionary work like that we've planned, and we're not just like driving and stopping at random people without making plans, right? I was like, yes, we're doing it the right way that we're supposed to do. But also, I think this is just another like neurodivergent awareness moment, because I learned in middle school, once classes started to get more complicated and there was more stuff that I was responsible for getting done for different things, I learned that I had a really hard time keeping track of everything and remembering everything unless I had a planner where I physically wrote things down. So I started when I was just, 11, 12 years old, regularly keeping a planner and writing down what I needed to do, like regularly, like every day, every week. And so I think this is one part of being a missionary where it's like, I didn't have to have the school structure to tell me what to do. I had this awesome built-in structure of a mission where they not only say, here's your planner and here's time for you to plan every week that you're supposed to set aside and plan, but also there was a list of all the things we were supposed to do. And I had this really awesome, well, it felt awesome, right? It felt awesome to know that if I do everything on this list of what I'm supposed to do, I have been a successful human and I can be happy with myself. That was something that I really liked about my mission. And I think that was because I struggle with executive function, and planning is really helpful for me. But I can see now how not knowing that that's like what was going on, I kind of misinterpreted that as like the missionary way of being super scheduled and super planned and super strict and rigorous and routine is a divine true principle, and we should all do this forever and be like this. Whereas I think in reality, it's helpful for me to do that kind of thing, but I don't think it's necessarily like an eternal spiritual truth that we should, do this. Like, not everybody needs to do this. So that's interesting for me to look back on now. Okay. Let's read the next day. Okay. Friday, April 17th, 2015. Mission Day 189. Well, I don't really remember what happened yesterday during the day, other than Sister Feist getting medicine for her cold. And then there was a big long story that I wrote that was very shenanigans and lots of laughing and silliness and being up late as a result. But there's a lot of personal sensitive information in the story, so I'll just give you, the vibe of silliness, antics, shenanigans. Sister Feist was sick, so that happened. And then I wrote, we got to clean the church this evening, and while we were there, we practiced for our hymn compilation for sacrament meeting, smiley face. Oh, and then I also wrote, I keep thinking it can't get any crazier, but last night it was so crazy. Oh, and I guess it's also relevant for the next day that part of the stuff that happened was Sister Crompton was startled and she kicked and stubbed her toe, and her toe was really hurting. So I'm just gonna go on to the next day because, cute story, but you don't really know the story, not a lot for me to say. So yeah, I'm saying, wow, this is the craziest transfer. Every day I'm writing, this is so crazy. I want to get settled, but also it's really wild and kind of fun to have so much energy and stuff. But okay, let's see where that goes. Saturday, April 18th, 2015. Mission Day 190. I just ate my words. It did get crazier. So, we didn't go out this morning since Sister Feist's cold is still pretty bad. But we realized that Sister Crompton's toe was broken that crazy Thursday night. So we called Sister Fuima Ono, the mission nurse, and she said we'd just have to wrap it. So we drove to Dakota Mart and got some wrap. While we were out, we decided we'd put off lunch to go print off Sister Crompton's talk materials at the library. On the way there, I noticed someone riding their bike speedily with a billowing red t-shirt. And then this person was at the library, and I could feel with my spirit antenna that he has ill intent for us. He very boldly stood at the door, opened it, and made forward small talk. I was freaking out on the inside and putting on a face on the outside, wondering why they, my companions, weren't walking in faster. We checked out computers, and he checked one across from us, then went on to sit and stare at us until he got up and walked somewhere. He came back, and when we got up to leave, he sped out the door, climbed on his bike, and stared through the window. Yeah, super creepy. I was praying the whole time about what we should do, how to best handle the situation. The other sisters were freaking out to the point they couldn't think. Sister Feist almost went out the emergency exit, which we later found out from Sydney was where he was waiting. And then I also wrote in miracle. So I had them crowd with me into the tiny restroom in the back. I called President Allen, left a voicemail, and then we decided we'd walk out, get in the car, and drive around with Sydney following behind. She had been on her way to stay with sick Sister Feist. And again, I wrote miracle. We made it out, put Sydney in with us at the church. Oops, totally against the rules. Then drove to Pine Ridge to eat lunch, a McDonald's drive-thru. President Allen called back then, but he just is having us still stay in Custer with added precaution and vigilance. We were sure we'd be sent straight to Spearfish. We'd really psyched ourselves up. It could have been so easy to not go to our teaching appointments this evening, but our lessons with Brother Lehman and Doug were so powerful. And although the battle against Satan seems a whole lot more real now, I've also felt the strength of numberless prayer and unseen angels. Even in the library, I was calm. I was at peace. I know the Lord is with us, and He will guide our path one step at a time. So, that's a lot, right? That's a lot I just said. And actually, I actually have been recording this over a few weeks. It's hard to talk about. It's hard to know what direction I want to go with it. And it's still, obviously upsetting to read about and remember. And, I'm glad to be in a much better situation now. And, I'm glad I feel safe in the world now and all that. But it's still, I can remember this, and looking back on this, it's almost like I'm looking back at, like, the way that I feel about my younger self is almost the way that I feel when I, like, my younger siblings, or, I imagine the way that you feel for your own kids, like, knowing that they're, like, in danger is just, like, terrible. And it's, like, hard. It's weird, the sense of protection I feel towards my the young part of me that went through this, so yeah, I've been sitting on this for a while. I recorded that section and I was like, okay, I just don't even know what to say. And then I was away for a week, busy with a music thing, and now I'm back and trying to get this recorded so I can put out an episode and not go many weeks without uploading, because I try not to do that. But I'm just having a hard time knowing what even to say. I guess thinking about it that way, the thing to say is just like, clearly I'm still impacted by this experience on my mission as well as the other experiences. And I'm still like angry about it. I'm like, you know, I'm angry that the church wasn't protecting me or other missionaries. You know, they have some policies now to like at least sort of address what to do if something scary happens, which is good. In my opinion, not enough. I'm sure I've already talked about that at length, but in my opinion, it's not enough. But also, when I was a missionary, and for most of the history of the church, people going out, young, vulnerable, and, you know, we had this perspective, like I wrote in here, I was like, this is like a battle against Satan, and that just seems more real now. And also I wrote that I was like, I feel the strength of prayer and angels, like the Lord is with us, he will guide us. Like, my perception of like how to actually interact with reality and how to understand what was going on around me was getting so warped. And that was like the design of the space that I was in, and there were no guardrails or protections for like, okay, what if something bad actually happens? And in this situation, I was lucky because whoever this guy was, he backed off, right? Like, there was this one creepy, freaky interaction, and as far as I remember correctly, I mean, I guess we'll see going forward, but I'm pretty sure we didn't run into this guy again. Like, for whatever reason, you know, he stopped whatever, right? But I was still scared about it. You know, like, I didn't know nothing else was going to happen, and just the fact that I know that this happened to so many missionaries. There's actually, you know, and I was trying to think about how to talk about this. I was, for a while, thinking about looking up other missionary stories of, you know, kind of when stuff went bad and they were in danger, and reading about that. But, you know, there are a lot of stories I could read, and I decided that would just be, you know, just kind of upsetting and not really pleasant to learn about, and also not my story. So, like, you're welcome to look up stories. I promise that there are many more, you know, that have happened. Also, many things way worse than, you know, this experience of having like a creepy guy stalking us. Obviously scary, I'm not downplaying that, but there are a lot of missionaries where a lot worse stuff happened, and they weren't just kind of harassed and afraid of violence, but they were, you know, they were actually like recipients of violence. Sorry, I'm having a hard time thinking of the right words because I'm just feeling upset. Yeah, and I know, like, the way I would have thought about it kind of the way I thought about it was like, well, like, God can't totally protect us from people with bad intentions, but, like, he did ultimately protect us from like being too scared or whatever. But the way that I knew, like, without even being explicitly taught not to tell anyone what was going on, I just kind of knew I shouldn't tell my parents. I think that's really messed up. And I did actually go back through my emails. I found the email that I wrote that week, and I wanted to share what I wrote in my email home, because just like how I was really prolific in my journals, also in my emails, I would write about what happened every day. And sometimes I would say kind of the same stuff that I had written in my journal, and sometimes it was pretty different. I was a little bit more honest in my journal than I was in my emails home, because I wanted the emails to be really positive. So I'm just going to read what I wrote about that day in my email now, so you can have an idea of how I was purposefully censoring the missionary experience. Okay, so here's my email. Saturday was kind of crazy, so we drove out to Pine Ridge to eat a de-stress lunch. McDonald's, blah. But by the evening, everything was pretty much back to normal, and the awesome sister from Spearfish stayed with Sister Feist. Sister Crompton and I were then able to go to our appointments that evening, and it was awesome. Doug had read scriptures a couple days last week, so we recommitted him to read every night this week and see what has changed. We met with Brother Lehman and decided we'd fast together to help him have the strength and desire to stop smoking. We had a lovely dinner with the Goldsteins, complete with Cinnabon cake, and an awesome visit with Sister Luck and Sister Rosenberg. One of the most important things in life is learning to love to do the will of our Heavenly Father, and a mission is a great time to learn how. I'm so grateful for the time I've been given to serve. Thank you so much for the prayers. We've really felt strengthened this week. Keep up the good work. Yeah, okay, so that's what I wrote about that day in my email home. So the only things that sort of mentioned at all that maybe anything unpleasant remotely had happened was I wrote, Saturday was kind of crazy, but by the evening everything was pretty much back to normal. And then I, at the end, wrote, thank you for the prayers, we felt really strengthened this week. That's like the only thing that was at all being honest and referencing the like scary thing that had happened. I was thinking about calling this episode Lying for the Lord, but I'm gonna save that topic for another week because it's really big, and I think there's more I want to say about it than just missionary safety. So I will talk about that practice, but I'm sighing a lot. Just the amount of like both sort of recognizing that it felt really scary and trying to acknowledge that there were miracles of God protecting us, but then also simultaneously trying to gaslight myself and also my mission president saying like, oh, it's not a big deal, like just stay in the area, it'll be fine. And me writing like, oh yeah, we were really just psyching ourselves out, like I'm sure it wasn't that big of a deal. So like I'm trying to write about it in sort of two ways of like, it was scary and God protected us and like that was bad, but also it was fine and like not a big deal. And it was like this weird, I didn't know what to say about it. And even writing about it, it was a little bit confusing. Like reading through it again, I was like, this doesn't totally make sense. the thing I was writing about it. So it was like, it still felt kind of jumbled and like unclear what was going on. I had a hard time like writing a clear narrative of what was going on, because I think there was this internal like fight going on of part of me knowing on a deep intuitive level, which I sort of called the spirit, but I interpret that as just my natural intuition, right? Of like, okay, this is not a good situation. I should not be permissive with this person. I should put up boundaries and like probably get authorities involved and like tell them to fucking back off, right? And not just be like nice and polite and pretend to be missionary, like not just like, oh, hello, sir, you're like, missionaries, here's our phone number with our card, like totally just fawning. And then at the same time, trying to convince myself that actually nothing had really happened. It was fine. And, my mission president called back and he's like, just stay in the area. You don't have to be emergency transferred. Just be extra careful. Just watch, just be cautious. Just watch. And thinking that was like, okay, well, he's the one with authority over us. He's got revelation from God. So even though we're feeling really freaked out, and we're feeling like unsafe and we should probably move somewhere else so that this creep can't like keep following us and like this can't escalate. Well, if our mission president says it's okay and we should just kind of keep an eye out, like, I guess we'll do that. And just that element of this, like, I guess that is one thing that makes me I have so much fury now. I'm just like, thank God nothing else happened with this guy. But if something else happened, it would have totally been our mission president's fault. And really the church's fault, because they weren't giving the mission leaders who had authority over all these young missionaries, they weren't giving them instructions on what to do. At least as far as I'm aware. And if something had happened and we were being the good, obedient, busy bee drones that we were supposed to be, and like something had happened worse, like there was nothing to prevent that, right? And I'm so glad nothing happened, but it's like, okay, nothing happened to me, but it happens to other missionaries. There are, I think I read earlier that the church does not release statistics of missionaries who get hurt or who are emergency transferred home or who are traumatized or, God forbid, killed, right? They don't release that number. They don't want people to know. But I think it's a pretty big number. I hypothesize. It's just really gross to me. And I think it's not good that missions are framed as this beautiful, formative experience where you go and you learn to serve and you become like Jesus and you become like a scriptorian theologian, like ready to go back and be just a full adult in the world, like go be like parents and leaders in the church. And people are so excited for their kids to go on missions, and kids are so excited to go on missions, totally not knowing that there is so much at risk. Beyond just the perfectionism, the neuroticism, all of the mental health, all the eating weird stuff, all the possible chronic illness you're getting from overworking. Like, in addition to all that, just like the bare minimum of being safe human in the world, like being protected from people with bad intentions. It's like not there. And it's disgusting to me. Yeah. So I guess I might say more about this, but I don't know. I'm going to go ahead and read what I wrote the next day. Spoiler alert. I don't really write anything else about it. I just kind of move on. Not a huge surprise. So here we go. Sunday, April 19th, 2015, Mission Day 191. Guess what I realized while at church today? Lynn's baptism was yesterday, so it wasn't crazy for everyone. Winky face. We had a beautiful Sabbath day in Custer. For sacrament meeting, we performed a version of I Know That My Redeemer Lives, and we got to partake of the sacrament and meet many more members of the ward. Our building here, which is actually the first building a past prophet dedicated during his apostolic ministry, has pews. Scranton has foldy chairs currently, and the pews were all full of families. Smiley face. Sister Crompton and I were fasting with the Rosenbergs, and Brother Lehman to help him. We were fasting with the Rosenbergs and Brother Lehman to help him. I guess I didn't put the name in the. We were fasting to help him. One of our investigators, I can't remember his name, to have the desire and the strength to quit smoking. Okay, so we're fasting. We're not eating. Now we're back in Spearfish with a smile on our hearts and coconut oil on our heads. Marvin, someone President Stockman referred to the missionaries a couple months ago, called today after having dropped us a month ago. We met with him at the hospital, and guess what? During that month, he has stopped his habit of smoking. Huzzah for Israel. Okay, so there are things that I was thinking about discussing more, but I don't know. I'm just feeling really gross about all the stuff on Saturday and my attempts to just sort of write it off. And I can still remember how freaked out we were, and I remember forever after this until I was transferred to a new area. I just in that area I never really felt safe. We split between two areas, and now one of the areas, every time we were in that area and we were in that apartment, I remember just always feeling kind of nervous, like there is potentially this weird stalker guy out creeping on us. That never went away, right? And I can remember that I was always freaked out about that, and I was trying to ignore it. My strategy at the time was to not deal with things, to just ignore them and just focus on being an obedient missionary and working hard and just push stuff out. I didn't know how to deal with it. I didn't want to talk about it. And that did not serve me well in this or any other dilemma. Ugh. And that's my 29th week as a Mormon sister missionary. Make sure to follow or subscribe to this podcast if you want to continue following my story. Ratings and reviews are very appreciated, and please also share this with anyone you think would be interested. I hope you have a great week, and if you want my advice, just remember that you can love others best when you love yourself first. Bye.